If I think about, maybe not everyone listening to this knows the Harry Potter stories, Voldemort splits his soul into 7 pieces called Horcruxes. There will always be a bit of
Yeah.
my soul there
Yeah.
with all those people or with that
Yeah.
organization. I think you do, yeah, you do leave a little bit of your soul there. That's why you're drawn back to hearing about it.
Yeah.
How's my team doing? How are my people doing? How are my projects doing?
Welcome to Connection Request. I'm Joel Lehman. Today on the show, I'm chatting with Rob Sartain, a creative executive based in London who most recently led the in-house content studio at the London Stock Exchange Group. Rob and I both left LSEG earlier this year, so I wanted to catch up with him to see how things are going and how he's thinking about his career in this moment of transition. We talk about it all, including how he went from being an employee at a bank to an executive at a financial services company. And we also unpack how he's had to overcome being an introvert throughout his career. We chat about the Great Redundancy Express, a quote from advertising from the year 1923, and unpack how general artificial intelligence might affect creative professions around the world. Rob's played a really important role in my career, which we talk about, and I was so grateful to him for coming on the show and being so open and thoughtful about some of life's big questions. By the way, happy Barbenheimer Day to all who celebrate. I'm actually on my way to see Barbie right now. Drop me a comment if you're seeing it too. Okay, here's my conversation with Rob Sartain.
I was thrilled to join your much illuminated and honorary list of guests that you've had so far. I'm not sure I'm going to stand up against entrepreneurs and innovators and business owners and Hollywood actresses, but I'll give it a go.
I think you will indeed. And surprisingly, in some ways, you actually have the honor of being, I think, my first British guest. So another weight on your shoulders as well, sort of representing the whole of the UK. Are you ready for that?
A little bit disappointed that you've not had any British contingent so far.
Well, I've been saving it for you. That's why. So let's get right into things. I'm really excited to chat with you today. We, of course, talk on and off a lot, but never in this sort of lean back conversation for me to just have a chance to grill you on you and your career and all sorts of stuff. So let's start off by, can you just tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Former group director of content studio at London Stock Exchange Group and at Refinitiv. Prior to that, creative director, head of channels at Thomson Reuters, studious creative throughout my career. Started out as an advertising photographer, went to university to do that as a course, which was back in the early 90s, actually, at the time when we didn't have the internet. We had magazines, we had TV, and what we shot on them was 10x8 cameras, so large format cameras. It was a very exciting time, a very exhilarating course to take, but it didn't really pan out for me. So I actually ended up going into banking for a short period. It seemed like a way to generate an income and actually sustain a life. So I did that for a while. And then actually 1999, Sue, my wife, encouraged me to actually get back to what I actually enjoyed and was actually good at, which was actually being an artist, being a creative. So I did a web technologies course, which at that point in time was at the birth of the internet. So it was very new, very fresh. No one was really in that sphere. So we learnt the basics of web design, HTML, how to code a site, how to build a site, how to write an email, the basic functions of surviving in that new industry. So I joined that world, and it was very much a change in my lifestyle and opportunity for me.
I love how many twists and turns, especially in the earlier chapters of your career, you saw, as well as like something I think we'll get into today is you've been a creative for a long time at this point, but you've seen so many shifts. So I want to get into all of that. But first, let's zoom back to young Rob, even pre-university, as a maybe teenager. What do I need to know about you back in those days to help understand who you became?
Okay. I was a very shy, quite introverted young person. I was very much into my art.
Hmm.
So I loved to draw. I loved to paint. I wouldn't say I was particularly great at it. I was good. If I remember back to some of my peers at school, there were people who were much better than me, but it was something I felt was the only thing I was really, really good at.
Hmm.
Surprisingly to you, probably, but actually, I flunked English at
Hmm.
school. Well, I would say flunked,
Really?
I passed, but I didn't pass with any high number, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's
that,
really interesting. You're such a talented writer.
thank you.
That's yeah, that's very surprising to me. What do you attribute not being great at that to? Just like young lack of interest or
I'm not sure, actually. Maybe lack of interest, maybe educational approach. I mean, I was actually quite a voracious reader
sure.
when I was young. So I obviously absorbed a lot of great words and language structure and that. But yeah, I think it's probably more just the structure of the courses that we did in the UK education system that really inspired me. So yeah, I was quite a history buff. Really enjoyed history. I've always enjoyed
Hmm.
understanding the past and what that can actually bring to the opportunities we have today. So as a young man, I was quite introverted. I was quite into sport. Wasn't particularly great at any sport. I played rugby for my school for a short period. I played badminton at a club. But I always enjoyed my sport. I actually enjoyed martial arts to some degree. Never went
Hmm.
very far with many of them, but I've tried out judo, karate, and taekwondo later in life as well. No belts to really offer up or suggestions that we should be getting into it anytime soon. But I always enjoy I think I always enjoy things where there's a craft behind them.
Yeah. Huh. That's interesting. That definitely feels like a through line. Okay, so when you originally went to university, you said you wanted to be an advertising photographer, and that's actually like the discipline that you studied. What inspired you to do that, and what was exciting about that world to you at the time, and what felt like the career path?
Okay, so when I was at school, I did art, and then I did a foundation art and design course between that university and school, which really benchmarked you where you wanted to go artistically. So at that course, you did graphic design, you did fine art, you did sculpture, you did art history,
Hmm.
photography as well. And I'd actually built up quite a passion for photography when I was about 16. And a couple of my art teachers sort of suggested I had a natural affinity with that medium.
Yeah.
And it seemed like a really good exploration of what I could actually do as an individual artistically. And that's where
Yeah.
my leaning went to. So it seemed like a natural course to get it. I don't think I actually have any great plan to think about where's that going to take me. I
Sure.
just, I've always enjoyed pictures, like I've always enjoyed
Yeah.
art. I've always enjoyed words, and it just seemed like a place where I could comfortably sit or fit at that time
Mm. Mm.
in my journey.
So you did that for a few years, or how long before
A
you
couple of
jumped into
years,
banking? Okay.
finished that, tried to work as an assistant to a number of photographers for a short period. Didn't really pan out at that point in time. I mean, I'm sure we'll get on to some of this as we go through, but I think a lot of that's probably on me as an individual and, you know,
Hmm.
being very introverted and quite shy at that age, not having the confidence to put myself out there, sell myself, go after
Yeah.
something with any great drive.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
probably held me back. And, you know, working in a sphere where you didn't necessarily need any particular background, you just needed to have a certain education level,
Yeah.
was a way of getting an income. And that just drifted into being longer than I thought it would, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's never anywhere I wanted to actually land, although
Yeah.
I've actually worked the last 15 years in financial
If I,
services.
I was
It's,
gonna say, yeah. Did
it's a
you
different
like?
aspect.
Yeah. 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 Did you like? What did you learn in that time though? When you were in that job, like, were there any skills, whether it's interacting with people or otherwise, that sort of you carried with you into later jobs?
Alcohol can be a demon. I learned that. I learned that I'm actually really good at learning new skills
Yeah.
quite quickly and repetitive skills I'm really quite good at, actually. So
Hmm.
some of the things you might think you need in the banking world. I'm not talking about the banking world where I was a wealth trader or an asset manager. I'm talking about some of the
Yeah.
more back of house kind of roles that you would
Yeah.
expect a younger person might do in a bank. So I was quite good at that. Yeah, there was a level of learning to work in an environment where there's rules and regulations and there are requirements on you. So yeah,
Hmm.
that was an education in itself.
And then I didn't know this part, but you mentioned it was your wife who actually helped push you or gave you the push. Like, tell me about that conversation and period from like, ooh, I think I should jump back to something that I
Yeah,
really love. How did that happen? And I guess what role did she play in it?
I wouldn't say I could remember it verbatim. It's 24 years ago,
That's okay.
but I think it's very much along the lines of this is not where I'm going to be happy for the rest of my life. That I've always been on the trajectory to want to do something in the creative sphere. This course came available, so wife actually helped fund some of it. We got some money from somewhere else. I knew it changed to our lifestyle. It was like 4 or 5 months of me not working.
Yeah.
It was a change to our living standards at the time as
Mm-hmm.
well, with no actual suggestion there would be a job at the end of it. So there's
Hmm.
quite a risk factor to that.
Yeah. Did it feel scary? Did it feel
It was
risky?
actually an exciting course to do. It was all new. You know, obviously, there were some companies starting to make a play in the internet world, and we had the early boom of the early 2000s, but no one was really going big in it. And it
Mm-hmm.
was an open field for everyone coming into it. So
Yeah.
coming out of that course, finding a role was going to be unnerving. But I found one quite quickly, actually.
Hmm.
I landed on my feet quite quickly.
Yeah. Seems, well, I mean, obviously it seems like it paid off, right? We'll get to the rest of your
Yeah.
illustrious career to date, but I think it's really interesting and neat that like in some ways you started off as a sort of junior banker role and ended up being an executive in a financial services company. That's a really interesting and fun trajectory. I'm curious, as you now look back over the past sort of few decades of your career, how much of it has felt planned versus organic, right? Like how much of it, obviously you took some calculated risks and steps, but how much of it over time were you intentionally planning and saying, I want to go from here to here, I want to go from here to here versus just kind of following the winds as they changed?
I think I've always followed the winds of change and have never planned any of it. I think I always hoped that I would get to where I got to and hopefully continue
Hmm.
on that trajectory. I'm not finished yet,
Yeah.
but I'd never planned any of it. I think what I've done is learned to put my head above the parapet a bit more than I would have done when I was younger and
Hmm.
learned some of those skills that actually help build that momentum behind you and think
Yeah.
about this is actually somewhere I could go. It's interesting that I remember from LSEG, Julia Hoggart, the CEO of the London Stock Exchange. I remember her saying once that, she has a very high profile role at the moment and she's held high profile roles before. She hasn't planned any of it. They've come as
Hmm.
opportune moments. And I think you have to really look at some of those. And that's what's happened to me with some of it. So when I joined Thomson Reuters, I didn't actually plan to join Thomson Reuters, which started me on that 2008, 15, 16-year journey of
Yeah.
working through three companies and numerous roles and brilliant experience and amazing people. I actually almost didn't start there. So
Hmm.
I actually went up for a contract role, and the individuals interviewing me at the start of the interview, there was some confusion between us about what I was actually here to interview for and what they were looking for. And I actually said, I think I'm in the wrong interview, and I was about to leave. And then someone else came into the interview and cleared it all up, and I ended up getting the position. Now, just imagine if I'd actually walked out 5 minutes before that person had turned up.
Whole different
Whole
life.
different, yeah, whole different life. So you just don't know. I'm quite
Interesting.
fatalist in that respect sometimes.
Yeah.
Not necessarily destiny, but things come through for a reason.
I'm curious as an introvert, especially if you still identify that way. I think that's an area in the corporate world maybe that we don't talk about enough. Maybe we're starting to over the past few years, but I'm curious, you became and are a successful executive and leader and somebody who needs to interact with people all the time. Was that hard to learn? Was that draining? Is it something that got easier over time? How do you sort of think about that now as you navigated that over the course of your career?
It's got much easier over time, but it's taken a long time. And that's just my personal experience.
Yeah.
It takes. I mean, some people it might be much quicker. Some people naturally more gravitate to situations where you're going to have to fight your introversion and find a way forward. But I'd say a lot of in the early years of maybe Thomson Reuters, I was very conscious of, was I doing the right thing? What do people think of me? How do I present myself? Being put in situations where you clam up and don't want to talk, don't feel anything concrete or complimentary to say to any conversation.
Yeah.
It just takes experience of exposure to those environments to actually get, not necessarily always comfortable with it, but know that you can elevate your voice, you can speak as a trusted partner, you can challenge the status quo, you can know that you're going into a conversation and people are not going to walk away from it thinking, who was that idiot? They're going to walk away just thinking, okay, we've solved the challenges we had that meeting for. They're not potentially even going to remember me or what I said. So as with most things that are fear-based, it's always in your head, really. And it's taken years to consider how to challenge myself. I do talk to myself a lot in my head in those situations. And I still do to this day, to some degree, if I'm in a big meeting, I will actually talk in my head to myself like, okay, Rob, now's your time to think about positioning this or saying this. Don't hold back on it. And you have to build yourself up, and you have to chant to yourself and encourage yourself and be ready to go. And it, because sometimes I remember many times I've already sat there ready, and you think the meeting's over now. I didn't say a thing. I didn't contribute. I'm useless. I might as well just go away now. But you've got to fight those feelings.
I shouldn't be surprised by you saying those things, because I think everybody deals with some level of that. But we've waited this long to get out the disclosure that we worked together for a long time. You were the department head, and so my boss's boss in the group that I worked in. I would have never known any of that had we not chatted about it. You, as a leader, always presented yourself with confidence, not unearned or overbearing confidence, but that's really interesting to hear that you dealt with some of the same things that all of us maybe who are earlier in our careers have also dealt with.
We all do. Yeah. Of course, everyone does. I find it very rare that anyone who doesn't have those feelings or situations sometimes thrust upon them and sometimes not. And you've got to actually reach out to others and actually learn from others and how they deal with them, how they approach the challenges that they face. And that's what I've done as well. I've actually, just by osmosis sometimes, and going, well, how did that person handle that situation so well? What do they actually do that was different to what I would do? And is it actually that hard to do it? Probably.
Yeah. Speaking of, who have been some of your career heroes and inspirations? Who are some of the people that over the course of your career you've looked up to, taken inspiration from, felt, I want to be like that person?
I think throughout my career, there's been quite a few people that have raised me up, either through the opportunities they've given me. So, our former glorious leader, Eileen Lynch, was an amazing advocate of mine, and she really gave me a big stretch opportunity and taught me so much about humility and kindness and how to lead with empathy. I'm sure she might listen to this, but Victoria Mello, I remember speaking to Eileen once about Victoria and saying, how does she do some of the things she does? How could I be like that? Wanting to emulate someone's not behavior or personality, but the capability to manage certain situations. And how do you boil that down into some simple tenets that you can actually advocate through your own approach as well? I have to say thank you to Stuart Pedlow, who actually hired me at Thomson Reuters and saved that initial meeting where I might have actually walked out the door. There's been so many people, and I think, that phrase that's often used, it always takes a village. It does. It's always about the people. I would
Hmm.
not be where I am now or where I've got to without any of the people I've had the opportunity to either work with or be a peer to or lead. It's always been
Yeah.
about the people. And there's so many people through our groups as well, yourself included and others on my previous leadership teams and our teams that I always look to about how they not just approach conversations or meetings or interactions, but the work they've done,
Hmm.
the thought process they've put to something. There's always something to be learned from someone else. There's
Yeah.
always someone that you go, wow, how do they actually think like that? Why don't I
Yeah.
think like that? Why don't I think like that? How can I be so
Absolutely.
stupid not to think like that? That's so easy. And you can't apply all of it. And sometimes you often think about these things and it just passes you by and you still can't do it. You're not making someone new. You are who you are. I don't think we ever actually change at the core of who we are. We just
Yeah.
develop. We just
Hmm.
build layers and layers of experience and opportunity into our lives. And you
Hmm.
develop what you have already there inside. I'm sure I could say the same, but I'm sure you're the same person you were actually 10 years, your core beliefs. A lot of that's founded when you're very young. So, if I think about that very young guy, that young Rob to where I am now, he's the same person. I've just got really good experience and
Yeah.
incredible relationships and have been immersed and flooded with seeing the brilliance of other people around me that's helped me become who I am.
If you went back and chatted to young Rob, took him out for a coffee or a tea or a beer, what would you tell him that you maybe wish you had known then that you do know now?
You can do it. Because fear is a big factor for so many people. You can do it. You will get there. Is that
Yeah.
interestingly, I remember this is before I actually met Sue that I was actually doing some contract work, maybe in the late 90s. Very, very menial. I would say menial. I don't disrespect anyone that does these jobs, but the sort of contract jobs where an organization just wants someone to come and do some data entry as a space filler. And I was on a bus on the first, it was only like a 2 week thing. And I got off the bus and I thought, what am I doing? Can't be my life. This cannot be my life. I end up at this point. I'm still quite young and I'm doing this. I'm much better than this. So I need to fulfill some of my potential. And you got to be frank with yourself sometime. So I'm glad I did because I moved somewhere else. I changed my direction. I didn't change my direction fully, but I changed it enough to start on a new path. And yeah,
Yeah.
you got to fulfill your potential.
Well said. I'm curious, you as a creative director, as a creative leader, you have touched a lot of campaigns, rebrands, cool content projects, all kinds of stuff. Do you have any favorite campaigns or creative projects that you've worked on? And I guess coinciding with that, do you have any particular favorite chapters of your career that you kind of look back on with a fondness?
But yeah, I think some of the early days in Thomson Reuters were really interesting because that was before I was in the internal communications organization then. The organization went through a lot of change. We had a lot of exposure to a lot of that change in the organization. We didn't necessarily have some of the tools we have today, like Microsoft Teams and SharePoint tools. So we were building a lot of things ourselves internally.
Hmm.
So we had, creative capabilities, coding capabilities. We're actually building our
Yeah.
own internal platforms. So we're having a lot of fun.
Hmm.
It's highly unregulated in a regulated organization. And it was a fun time. We're
Yeah.
getting to express ourselves, jumping from working on an internal comms campaign to maybe working on something with Reuters to working on something to do with the CEO and the big AGM broadcast. There was that heady mix of, wow, I'm all over the place. I'm learning so much. This is really interesting stuff. I think it's hard to pinpoint some campaigns. There's been literally hundreds of maybe thousands over
Yeah.
the years. I think leading the brand launch of Infinitive was, I would say, a career highlight. That was a big leap at the time. It was not just me, of course. There was many, many people involved in delivering that exceptional outcome for that brand.
Yeah.
But I really felt at that time, okay, I need to take this seriously, but
Hmm.
not to the point where it kind of stresses me out. So how do I bring the right attitude to everyone who's going to help do this? How do I actually bring the right essence of what we're trying to do here, which is a big shift. It's a big change for a brand. So I think that was, and delivering that and knowing what the success that came from that, I think is probably the biggest career highlight. And that's campaign.
Yeah.
I've got people highlights, but that's campaign wise. I wouldn't say all the work creatively is probably my favorite work. There are other smaller pieces we've probably done over the years where I think, well, I think you go back to that blog article I wrote recently about Sublime. There's things I've seen that we've done, maybe they haven't always come to fruition, where I think, wow, that's really good stuff. And there's stuff I haven't liked as well, and I think that's a really good mark for anyone to consider when they're in a creative role or sphere. Is there's always going to be pieces of work your teams or your colleagues do that you actually personally like, but it's right for the brand and it's right for the solution it's trying to solve. Disagree and connect and go with it. So I think it's as well as learning that as well. The Definitive launch was a pretty big gig.
Yeah. I mean, I came a little bit after some of the early folks who worked on it, but I mean, that was also one of my career highlights, is just like the energy around new company, new culture, new brand, new teams, let's be honest, budget to do things and try things. That was a very exciting time, and a chapter I'll look on fondly as well, that I was happy to be there alongside you. So one thing, you kind of touched on this earlier, but you have been in the creative industry for a long time. You have lived through lots of transformational changes. Like you said, the internet, digital, mobile, social, and beyond, metaverse, blockchain, crypto. I can just throw out all sorts of buzzwords throughout kind of that long period. What has stayed the same and what has changed?
Wow, that is a big question. It's an interesting question, because I've been considering that for a new blog post. I'm actually reading a book at the moment that's called The Anatomy of a Humbug, which is about a different view on the advertising industry. And that talks very much about, the opening of the book talks very much about certain phases of how people look at advertising and marketing industry to some degree. Some people look back at the past and just see it as the past, and the future is only where we're going to go, and that's all we need. If you think about some of the latest trends like metaverse and generative AI, some people look back and go, well, actually, we had it really good back then. Now it's rubbish. We're just not delivering the same level of creativity and quality as well. But what's interesting in that book, and it's a bit of a digress from your question, there's a book that was written in 1923, which is about the science of advertising. And there's a quote in there. I'll see if I can dig it out quickly, because it fascinated me. Because if you didn't know this quote was from 1923, you wouldn't believe it, because it sort of just reflects this day and age. Where is it? The time has come when advertising has in some hands reached the status of a science. It is based on fixed principles and is reasonably exact. The cause and effects have been analysed until they are well understood. The correct methods of procedure have been proved and established. Advertising, once a gamble, has thus become, under able direction, one of the safest of business ventures. Now, that was 100 years ago that was written.
Wow.
No, that's amazing, isn't it? Because you could actually say, well, that's about today.
You could write that today, and people would believe it. So
what's the biggest change? I find that quite a hard one to answer, because when you work in the industry, change comes at you all the time, and for the most part, it's executional, it's tactics, it's tools.
Sure.
That's what they've been. I started out working on the web, but all the roles I've had have always included omni-channel experiences, whether, print or mobile or web or TV or video. I think the biggest change has been accessibility. Well, for everyone, I think just the ability to connect seamlessly with the whole planet, for the most part, but very quickly. Sometimes to the detriment of building great brands. I think one of the challenges you can see now is this sort of hype cycle approach with metaverse and others, that everything needs to bed down a bit, chill a bit, and really understand how they're going to fuse themselves into what we do within our world, which is our advertising, marketing, communications. They're just tools at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I think what I have seen is and this is coming through a lot more in social conversation, industry conversation. What it shouldn't do actually is to talk about connecting to humans. That has become more prevalent and obvious over the last few years to me. If I think about some of the ways we approached work in the past, it wasn't talking to humans. It was fulfilling an industry standard in terms of how people think you should talk to other humans in those industries. Whereas ultimately marketing is a conversation, isn't it, with someone? And that's how you should be talking to them. And it's about emotion. And I'm seeing that come through a lot more, actually, which is really exciting because that harkens back to what a lot of people say was the greatness of the advertising and marketing of the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Was, you're connecting at a human level with people, you're sparking that glint in their eye, that raise of the smile, that you're inducing them to something that's going to get them excited and trust, which I think is getting better and better. I think it's the only caution I said. I know we've spoken before, and I've joked about the metaverse, and to some degree I made some jokes about Chat GTP as well. But they'll all have great roles to play, but only through human intervention and human creativity. Only then will they be truly exceptional.
Agreed. And on that, we can't have a conversation in 2023 about creativity without talking about AI, at least for a minute. You and I have texted about, joked about, talked about ChatGPT. I've been messing around with Midjourney, which is, as like a non-designer, non-visual person, it is thrilling to type words into a box and have whatever I can imagine come out. I'm just curious, do you have any good hot takes about how those tools specific to creativity, creative professionals will impact our lives and the work that we do?
I think they will. I'm not sure yet if they're going to have an impact in terms of the roles people have. I think they obviously will. It's interesting the thing about the word creativity. I saw a few pieces online recently where people have put creative briefs into Chat GTP. That is going to churn out a response in 5 seconds versus putting a team together on a brief, and they might take a day to come up with 2 or 3 ideas. Ideas that came out of it were okay, but what they were was the ideas that the creative team would probably come up to within the 5 or 6 they'll come out with, and those are the 2 or 3 they'd cross off because those are the expected ones. So it will help accelerate opportunity. There will be efficiencies, there will be a level of automation, absolutely. What I do find a bit unnerving is, especially in the last few months, so many people putting up on social about this is how to improve your marketing, this is how to get in front of your customers really quickly, put all these prompts into Chat GPT. They really should change that bloody name. Assuming that's how you do marketing, assuming that's going to get you results. I think
of just like blindly putting stuff into a robot and then blindly accepting what it spits out as this is what you should do.
Yeah, I mean, the other good thing I've seen a lot of recently is, and I think that some of this came out of a number of the sessions that was at Cannes last week, is the value of long-term brand building. I think has been missing in our industries and other industries for the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And to see people recognizing that, industries recognizing that, the potential investment going into doing that well, that's exciting for anyone in this world at the moment because, it's become a world of attribution, model mixes, and maybe an over-application of certain things like behavioral economics and neuroscience, and maybe just getting back to some of the core basics of building really good brands long-term. And knowing that that's actually going to generate the success and ultimately the trust you need with customers.
Yeah.
So, there'll be short-term excitement around generative AI. There needs to be legislation, absolutely. I know I've already seen some agencies, some companies already putting their own guidelines in place, how they will be used, how they'll actually benefit from it out of the gate. I think you have to be clear with people, though, that if you are, especially advertising to them or marketing to them, that if anything is solely generated by generative AI, we need to say this was not developed by human hands.
Yeah, agreed. That should be like a benchmark, right? Like a standard. You are an excellent writer, as I mentioned. I've been checking out your Substack. There's a little plug for that. Listeners should go and check it out because you are an excellent writer. I think, and even, I've read a lot of your writing in the past, but it's fun to see you in a new, unencumbered medium and format. And something that you've been writing about and sort of weaving in is your time writing what you call the Great Redundancy Express. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit and just hear how this chapter of your life has been, what you've been up to, what you've been thinking about. But I'm just going to read a quote first from one of your recent posts. Actually, maybe it was one of your first ones. You said, quote, "Time has become a wanting and vocal companion, a relentless chaperone readily bellowing out the minute by minute of my day with little care of consequence." You're a great writer. You great turns of phrase. How's this time been? What's it feel like?
There's actually someone asked me that yesterday. It's gone quickly. So it's been 6 months nearly, I believe. I actually thought I'd be back in work by now.
Sure.
And I say it's been emotional. I don't know what film that was from, but that phrase, it's been emotional. It has. It's been.
Yeah.
It has been. I think I put the pressure on myself after a few months. Think, I must get work. I don't actually potentially need to right now, but I must get back. Before the world forgets about me, before people start questioning why there's a gap in my CV, before I'm irrelevant, I'm not getting any younger. I need to get back to work. And I think I took the wrong attitude to some degree there, because I don't need to rush it. I need to run the right thing for me. And it has been. There's been periods of, okay, there's a grieving period. I left behind a big team of wonderful people who I adore. So there's a grieving period. There's a period of carefree abandon to some degree. It's quite nice to have to worry about the day-to-day machinations of whether that PowerPoint is going to be right for that call, or some issue someone else has, or doing a performance review, or looking at a budget sheet. But then you just start to miss a lot of that as well.
Yeah.
I think, well, I actually need to fill my day with stuff I'll do with family, but what else am I going to do? So, the blog is part of that, learning. But thinking about, I don't need to be doing some of these things. I don't need to write a blog. I don't particularly need to do some of these learning things. I think I've learned quite a lot, but I think it's important to keep my attitude right in terms of keeping my head fresh with what's going on, what I can bring to a conversation. I think I wrote a little bit about this already, and I've spoken to others about this. The whole recruitment process is, from what I've seen so far, a farce. But I've obviously been on the other side of that for many years, bringing people into organizations, maybe not seeing the challenge that you actually face when you're out there having to find a role, and the systems in place, what the hurdles you potentially have to get through, assumptions you may make about yourself. Think, well, actually, I've done all these things. It says it in black and white, plain and clear. And then you get rejection after rejection, and there's no comeback. There's no way of finding out rationale. Did anyone actually look at it? Is it actually a machine talking to me? Is it someone who's sitting in their bed at 11 o'clock at night on their PowerPoint, on their PC, just clicking through rejections because they can't be bothered to read them? You don't know. So it's a heady ride, but it's good. It's good. I'm in a good place.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I'm just curious. Like, you spent over the course of like multiple companies and multiple chapters in your career, a total of, what'd you say, 15-ish years at those string of companies?
15, yeah.
Yeah, you've been on many sides of that table, but like, when you found out that you'd be departing, how did that feel, and what were the stages of like emotion that you went through?
That's a good question. I think that because I was quite involved in many elements of the process, the broader process, I was quite comfortable with it. I thought long and hard about would it be the right time to think about going somewhere else, as in career
Yeah.
trajectory. Could I get into another industry? There's some other industries that are quite interesting. That in
Hmm.
itself is a hard gig, what I'm finding as well,
Yeah.
which is another problem with, I think, the recruitment process, the siloed mentality that if you haven't worked in a particular industry, your skills aren't transferable. I mean, marketing is marketing. It's marketing to humans. We're all humans. So I appreciate there's some level of skill needed in some industries, but it should be more open, I think, and you'll get a great diversity of skills and capabilities running across industries. Yeah, I was actually quite comfortable with it, to be
Hmm.
honest. I got the time to get used to it.
Yeah.
You know, I've had,
I mean, for what it's worth, I think you sort of knew for quite a while or for an extended period of time, obviously before the rest of us in your team found out.
yeah, a couple of months.
Uh, and I think at that point, then what amazed me the most in reflection and then all the way up until you left was your level of commitment and focus and care from where I sat didn't change at all. And that to me is a really impressive thing to do, to not turn off the gas or whatever metaphor you want to use of like putting in time, attention, and care. How did you sort of keep that news to yourself? And how did you like not let your foot off the gas or the
Well, to
petrol,
the
if
last
I'm talking?
question, I've always been really good at locking away the secrets. So, you know, when Refinitiv, was it Refinitiv to LSEG? Either that, Tom Sawyer's to Refinitiv. You know, I've got involved in those moments long before
Yeah.
many others.
Yeah.
Fortunately for the roles we play, I've been brought inside on some of those projects. So I've got quite good at keeping those kind of secrets and keeping a stoic face through that.
Sure.
But you know, to your last question, why wouldn't I? I've got a huge group of people passionate about them,
Yeah.
want to make sure they're comfortable. I'm leaving on good terms. I would do no one, I'll do myself a disservice if I
Hmm.
didn't. And I didn't have to put any effort into doing that. It was business as usual.
Yeah.
Lead this
Well,
group through this change as
yeah.
best I can
Yeah.
till I go.
Well, I really admire that.
Thank you.
I think it's a good example to set for others and a good learning that like when it makes sense for you, you should put the time, attention, and care into the way that you leave a place.
Yeah, and the same when other people leave an organization. Someone said this to me years ago. You know, if someone has to leave, whether through redundancy or they actually get fired, always let someone leave with their head held high.
Hmm.
Because with whatever's transpired, that you're going to be in that situation someday. They may have other things going on in their world. If you don't, you're not benefiting anyone. So give them the respect that's due to let them leave with their head held high. And I want to leave with my
Yeah.
head held high. And the best way to do that was continue performing as best I could for the group.
Yeah. I think you did. One kind of last question on this chapter. My sense of you and working closely with you for a good few years is that you were and are pretty enthralled with and fulfilled by work. You put a lot of time into it. You were on Teams messages late at night, your time. You led a global team. So part of that was just like kind of how you operated. You thought a lot about how you led the team, but also you got pretty involved in some of the details of specific projects. I'm just curious, like, how much of yourself now with the distance of being out of that world, how much of yourself and your identity were wrapped up in your job and in your career? And I'm just curious, like now with a little bit of distance, how do you think about your relationship to work overall?
Wow, that's a good question. You're right, actually. I was not overtly to the point that it was suffocating or challenging to my, personal life. Maybe years ago it was actually.
Sure.
And I did talk to my wife about that, and we talked about that because I had cognizant that, I think a few years ago I was putting a lot in, and I would always be on this infernal machine in the evenings. And that goes
Yeah.
back to wanting to be seen, fighting the introvert. I got a lot better at that. I got a lot better at delegating,
Yeah.
assuming positive intent, trusting others.
Yeah.
How much of my identity, I don't necessarily wrapped up in work. I just really enjoyed a lot of it, you know?
Sounds natural.
Yeah.
And also, like, I'm not singling you out, right? I'm just like, you're someone I know well. And something I think about, I think a lot of people think a lot about, right, is whether you call it work-life balance or whatever, how you blend sort of your non-work parts in. Yeah. So I'm just curious, like, if having a little bit of distance, I don't know, it has changed anything about how you think about your identity and your career.
No, it hasn't actually. I don't think there's any more complex an answer to give, actually. I don't really think of it on those
Yeah.
terms.
Hmm.
There probably is some psychology to it. Why
Sure.
do I do miss it to some degree,
Yeah.
but I'm not missing something. I don't sit and going, oh, I'm desperate to be back
Yeah.
in that environment. I do actually still think about some of the projects. The first few weeks, it was crazy. It was like I was thinking about some projects
Yeah.
and having to beat them out of my
Yeah.
head, going, will you please leave me? I don't care anymore. No one's going to care that I care. So,
I mean, I've experienced similar things. I still text people, call people, chat to people rather regularly. Some of that is just like not being able to turn that off. Some of it is just like my relationships with
I
the
would give you a
team.
response to it, actually. If I think about, maybe not everyone listening to this knows the Harry Potter stories. Voldemort splits his soul into 7 pieces called Horcruxes. There will always be a bit of my soul there.
Yeah.
With all those people or with that organization. Yeah. I think you do leave a little bit of your soul there. That's why you're drawn back to hearing about it.
Yeah.
How's my team doing? How are my people doing? How are my projects doing?
Yeah.
I'm sure even a couple of years from now. It does grow away, actually. Yeah. If I think about we left Thomson Reuters in 2017 or 18, 6 years ago maybe. I feel quite distant from that organization now.
Yeah, interesting. Me too.
Yeah. So it does go. But
yeah,
I think the last 8 so years have been very pivotal, especially for me, is that part of my soul would always be there. Hopefully, hopefully if it doesn't stay like that, I don't end up like Voldemort and fading away.
That's a great analogy. Like, other than the fact that we're comparing you to Voldemort, which you are not, that's a great analogy. What do you want to do next, Rob? What's, like, if you sort of think about designing your next chapter of your career, you could go into an agency, you could go into a company, you could be a creative director, you could lead a team, you could be a CMO, you could do all sorts of different things. The world is your oyster. What do you most want to do? You mentioned other industries. Like, what's exciting you right now? What sounds the most interesting to you?
Another great question. I don't think I found the answer to that fully yet. Part of what I've been doing recently is actually exploring what do I actually like to do. I actually did a little bit of design for something the other day, and I haven't actually done that physically for quite some time because I've had incredible people to do all that, and they did it so much, much better than I ever would. And especially with things like Midjourney now, I don't need to bother. So I love building brands. I love the process of building brands.
Yeah.
So I think whatever I do next, I want to be in that particular sphere. I think it's just something. So I've just read a great book by a lady called Dow Fielding. I actually wrote to her and said, I loved your book. It was really good. It's called The Brand Book. It just basically takes you through how to think about building a brand. Now, there's always stuff for everyone to learn. And I've learned stuff. A lot of it I can see what we've done previously, but thinking about brand strategy, brand essence, how you structure all these things, how you build opportunity for your organization, how do you think about your right to win in the market, cultural context, customer insight. I actually really enjoy all that, bringing it together and coming up with that solution, because it's a very saturated world now, and it's harder and harder for, especially if you think about financial services as well. Not that I particularly always want to stay in that world, but it's hard to be product competitive when so quickly competitors can augment what they have to be very similar to what you have. So it comes down to what's the difference in the brand? Is it your customer service? Is it your ethos? What you're actually doing? The broader market, for the broader economy, or whatever it is that's most important to your brand. I like finding that and I like doing that.
Well, I'm so excited
So, do
to
you know anyone
see.
who needs me?
I know lots of people. You could work on my brand. No, I'm really excited to see where this next chapter of your journey takes you. You're gonna have to come back on and talk about it once you land that next thing or you figure out what is the right next step for you. Before I let you go, is there anything I forgot to ask you about, or any other wisdom you want to impart both onto me but also to our listeners?
Wisdoms. Okay, a couple of wisdoms I've been given over the years that I think are really good is always look after number one. That's not to the detriment of anyone else, but just take care of yourself first. Always take the money. That doesn't necessarily translate as actually taking the money physically, but again, think about what's going to be the best package for you, the best place for you. However kind you're being, be kinder. I think it's the other one that I've heard and learned from. So those
Great bits of advice.
Bits of wisdom for you.
Those are great. Rob Sartain, you've meant a heck of a lot to me in my career. I'm really grateful that our mutual friend Ryan Shepard brought me over to Refinitiv, because it meant a chance to work closer with you and be part of the team that you built and led. You've done a lot for me. You've championed me for some reason. You've mentored me both informally and formally. I miss your team's chats at all hours of the night. I miss your very eloquent and verbose emails to the team. I miss learning from you and your leadership, even though I still get to learn from you in other ways now in this chapter. I just want to say thank you for the impact you've left on me and the teams that you've led, because I think you probably don't fully know and recognize the impact you've had on people and the teams that you've led and built. So I just want to say
really sweet,
thank you.
Joel. Thank you. I think I do
true.
actually to some degree, and I take a lot of, when I left, actually, I took a lot of heart from that, from the messages I got, from all the years of, I would consider, challenge I personally had to try and get to where I wanted to get to hear some of the things people have said. We all have, it's not about ego, it's about finding your place. And when people say you've done the right things for us, one of the comments I got when I left was you made a corporate not feel like a corporate, and that was like one of the best feedbacks I got.
Absolutely. I agree. I think you're one of a kind, Rob Sartain. Thanks for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
Chat.
Anytime,
fun.
Friend. Anytime.
That is it for today's episode of Connection Request. What'd you think? Let me know. I love hearing your feedback. Just an FYI, we have one more episode of season 1 that'll be coming out in 3 weeks probably, but we'll see. I'm off on holiday for a little bit, so I won't be doing any podcasting then, because why would I do that? Anyway, today's show is produced by Shrug Content, which you can learn more about at shrugcontent.com. Please send all of your Barbie reviews, your Oppenheimer reviews, and your Beyonce reviews to connect@shrugcontent.com. You can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and Threads, I guess, because that's a thing we do now. And the show is on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Until next time, be well, and thanks for listening.